This is our presentation. Boom!
Macaulay
Versus Maryland. Baboom!
Background. Congress passed an act called an Act to incorporate the subscribers to the Bank of the United States on April 8, 1816, which gave the incorporation of the Second Bank of the U.S. The bank first was operational in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1817. The bank opened a branch in Baltimore, Maryland, and transacted business as a branch of the Bank of the United States by giving banknotes and performing other usual things that banks would do and perform. Both sides of the litigation admitted that the president, directors, and company of the bank had no authority to establish the Baltimore branch of Office of Discount and Deposit, other than that Maryland had adopted the Constitution of the United States.
Issues. The main issues of McClellan versus Maryland involved federal power versus state power. The Congress decided to establish a second national bank. The state viewed it as unconstitutional. They believed the federal government went against rights by creating its own bank. Maryland decided to set an example by collecting taxes from the bank. The bank refused to pay. A citizen of Maryland filed a suit against the bank in Baltimore County Court, hoping to recover a portion of the delinquent tax. The case was eventually appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court determined Congress had the right to establish a national bank under the idea of implied power. In the opinion of the court, Marshall concluded that Congress had the right to establish a national bank as an implied power under the necessary and proper clause. Because the bank was being used to further Congress' constitutional authority to tax and distribute functions, unlike the Articles of Confederation, which preceded the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution does not prohibit the exercise of implied powers necessary to assist in carrying out constitutional mandates. The court also held that the Supremacy Clause, which elevates federal law above state law, when the two are in conflict, the bank was protected from being taxed by the state.
Facts. The United States in 1819 had a federal bank, the Bank of the United States. The state of Maryland voted to tax all bank business not done with state banks. This was a tax on people who lived in Maryland, but who did business with banks in other states. They also wanted to tax state of Maryland. Andrew McCulloch, who worked in the Baltimore branch of the Bank of the United States, refused to pay the tax. The state of Maryland sued, and the Supreme Court accepted the case. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote that the federal government did have the right and power to set up a federal bank. Further, he wrote, a state did not have the power to tax the federal government. The right to tax is the right to destroy, he wrote, and states should not have that power over the federal government. Boom.
In conclusion, the state of Maryland wanted to limit the powers of the federal government. A tax was placed on all payments that came from banks. The Second Bank of the United States was the target of this attack. When James McCulloch refused to pay the tax and the court eventually went before the Supreme Court, the court decided that the Second Bank of the United States was needed so that the federal government could function. Therefore, the bank was constitutional and the state of Maryland could not tax the bank affairs. McCulloch and the federal government won. Yay, America!
Macaulay
Versus
Finland.
No.
Maryland.
Hey, what?
Maryland.
Get ready, get all pumped.
Oh God.